Good afternoon, folks. It's Simon from Mountain Training Cymru here. Thanks for coming along to this workshop. You'll be glad to hear I'm not at home today. I've come into the office to work, so my Wi-Fi signal is much more reliable than it was yesterday at the beginning of the conference. It's my pleasure to introduce Mike Rain to you this afternoon. He's going to be running this workshop for you. I don't think Mike needs much of an introduction to many people. He's been very prolific over the years. He's been a senior instructor at Plaza Brennan. He's got a background in teaching and secondary teaching. He's also had a sort of influential and active role as a council member for Mountain Training Cymru. He sat on our board representing Plaza Brennan. And he's also, as you know, the author of a very popular book, which is now into its second edition. And I guess is selling very well, as always. So it's my pleasure to hand over to Mike, who will run this workshop for you. Over to you, Mike.
Thank you, Simon, and hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. It's quite a lot of sitting down at the computer screen today, isn't it? I'm really sorry about that. Hopefully you've worked out how to move around your pictures on your screen. So I'm sharing my screen now, and if you toggle above your picture, you can choose what view you have, whether you want my face or a few faces, and you can move it around your screen as well. So hopefully you've worked that out now. I'm just playing with mine as I speak because it's not showing me exactly what I want. That'll do nicely. So teaching about the environment. Well, let's just apologize. We want to do this as practical. We want to do this outside. We want to do lots of fun and games, but once again, you're gonna have to listen to me talking to some pictures. I tried to do without a PowerPoint, but even, you know, with a live camera, it's me showing you things, me talking about stuff and me showing you things. So actually the things I wanted to show you were enhanced by pictures. So I have gone back to the PowerPoint, but I'll do my best to make it as well. I'll just do my best. That's all I can do. So who we're teaching and why and how might we do this? So we'll just start off with the why, because we do get focused on the Mountain Leader Award Mountain Leader qualification. And I'm very guilty of that because it is a standard, it is the one we're used to, and it's got a very clear syllabus component that we can all work to. But we need to bear in mind the Lowland Leader Award, which qualification, because that has got quite a different environmental input. And it was Ross Worthington who described it to me as a sort of lowland international mountain leader, because it's much more about following a path and introducing people to the places they're in, talking about some of the issues, talking about agriculture and forestry and beaches and things. So massive part of the Lowland Leader Award. It's currently not well described in the Hill and Moorland Award. I'm hoping that will change with the little review that's going on in Hill and Moorland content. But of course, when we're rock climbing too, and I know myself, when you're teaching, working on a rock climbing instructor course or any of the rock climbing courses, the environment, it does suffer. It does come second to belays and nuts and fall factors and things. So just a bit of a prod there. They're quite simple questions to ask. What sort of rock are we climbing on? Why is it like this? Why is it here? What's going above it? What's going below it? And then, of course, all the access stuff and the different land uses. So we are teaching it in a range of different environments, and we as providers and directors need to be capable of doing that. So, right, I tell you what, I did this because I thought, listen, you're going to be sat here looking at me. So this is something for you to do. I'm not going to leave this screen on long. Get your camera out, take a picture of this one, or do a screenshot. Do it quick because I'm going to move on from this one. But all it is a little quiz for you to do. So while I'm witching on, you can work out what flower number 1 is, what flower number 2 is, what flower number 3 is. And they're all things that grow in the hills. So it's just a little task for you to do, because you'll get bored otherwise. So got a picture, I'm moving on. I've moved on. Here's another one for you, birds this time. So take a picture of this one or screenshot it, whatever's easiest for you. And then you can be looking at this on your phone, and we'll come back to them at the end and see how many you got. I'm sure you'll get them all. They're not too difficult, really. Said that before, haven't I? So you have a little play with that quiz, and I'll get back to the talk. Well, why do we teach about the environment? Because it says so in the syllabus. Inspire and enthuse groups, continually expand their knowledge. I guess to do that, you've got to be doing it as well. So I'm hoping that you are inspiring and enthusing people. I'm hoping that you are continually expanding your knowledge. And like, I don't know, you kind of get good at grid references and good at following bearings. So, and you practice it every time you teach it, but the environment's just constantly growing, constantly changing. There are always new issues coming up. There's been a lot of talk this year about the numbers of pheasants and partridges in the country, hasn't there? So if you're in Lowland Leader Award and you're wading through pheasants, why are there so many pheasants? Are they causing a problem? So, you know, there's lots of topical issues, and I think you need to try and keep on top of those as much as you can. And obviously, as there's no, you know, conflict in land use is always going to be there. As we start to talk about things like rewilding, that can become more of a conflict for some people. Could be it's just a misinterpretation of the word. It could be that the word means different things to different people. So conversations about things like rewilding need to be had. And we can see some lovely rewilding there in Cumidwell down the bottom there. I bet you didn't know Cumidwell was wooded. If you get it from the right angle, that's the Idwell Forest down there. So it's on the syllabus. But bigger than that, more important than that, we have a responsibility. We're taking people out into this environment. We need to educate them about this environment. We need to say, this is not a natural environment, okay? It's not supposed to look like this. We've made it like this. We've removed forests. We've changed grazing patterns. We've built roads and built footpaths and railways and whatever else. So, you know, you need to have some understanding of the environment, what it's like, why it's like that, and how it's changed. It's obvious that we don't leave litter, isn't it? Orange peel takes at least 2 years to biodegrade in the hills. It's obvious that we don't scratch our names on the road. Well, if it's that obvious, why am I able to take these photographs? So many of the people that you take out need to be right on top of this with the people they take out. And the top left picture I think is quite interesting because this is our beautiful countryside. This is in Wales. You just get past to the east of the national park and you're into this sort of landscape. The barbed wire, the fence stands for itself. The field is not a natural field. It's a field that's been enhanced with chemicals and fertilizers over the year. It's got a higher density of sheep than a natural landscape would sustain there. But hey, that's our food. I like lamb. I bet you like lamb as well, don't you? So, you know, we can't be completely against this. We just need to have some appreciation and some understanding of it. The fence has replaced a hedge. The hedge would be a habitat. The hedge would be a highway for nature. Beyond the field, there's a plantation. That's not natural, is it? We planted that there. We replaced the native trees with conifers because who can make a few quid out of conifers? But then I quite like paper. I use a lot of paper. We need conifers growing somewhere. So these are, you know, it's difficult to be right and wrong about these things, but I think we have a duty that when we take people out into the countryside, we understand ourselves and can flag up some of these issues ourselves and start to talk knowledgeably about the places we're in. And that's where, you know, you've got to know some stuff as well. There's no easy ways to this. You've got to do some reading. You've got to keep up, if you like. So how do we do all this? Sorry. It's a tricky one, isn't it? And there's no easy way. I'm just moving around my screen again, sorry. Books are brilliant, and there's a lot of books. And the idea behind Nature Snowdonia really was that you'd have everything you'd see on the hill in one place rather than having to carry the shelf of books. But I like the books, so I've got lots of books and I constantly referring to the books. But taking out all these books whenever you go out is probably quite a big ask, isn't it, really? Which is why books like Nature Snowdonia, Nature of the Brecon Beacons, and the forthcoming, very much anticipated Nature of the Lake District are really handy books to have, and they're designed for you to use. Other things you could use are apps, and I think the app world is changing quite a lot at the moment. And one of the common questions I get is, will Nature Snowdonia come out as an app? And it probably won't, because we can't put in the IT investment that's required to make an interactive app. Some of these apps now use, I don't know if it's artificial intelligence or they send it away to experts, but they will identify things. I've got one on my phone called PlantNet that I use quite a bit, and there's all sorts of iNature apps and Google Eye. If you've got reception, that is, these things are fantastic. You just take a picture of something and it'll tell you what it is. It's remarkable. It'll often give you the American name for it, but you can click somewhere else and there'll be a list of other names, and you can choose whichever name you want to use. So the best apps are expensive, fancy pieces of kit now. The others are simply books. So, you know, it's like having a Kindle book on your phone. There's a chap called Alan Walker. If you Google Alan Walker, mountain plants, mountain flowers, Alan Walker, he's done his free. So you can have a free download from Alan Walker of mountain plants. It's fantastic. One of the ones I use quite a lot is the Collins Book of Birds. You have to pay for it, but it's a good book. And it's better than the book because you got bird song, you got the sounds. But things like that only work if you know what it is you're looking for. So I might narrow down the bird to 2 or 3 and then listen to the song and I can identify the bird. But I need to know where I'm looking in a book. The same with Alan Walker's, but I need to know where I'm looking in the book. It's hard to flick through them. Whereas the artificial intelligence ones, they'll give you a pretty good stab of what it is. Though again, caveat warning, it's like using a calculator. You should have a rough answer in your head of what it is so that you know you're getting the right answer and not just take it at face value. Laminated cards, I'm going to come back to laminated cards. Let me just have a little look in the blue thing down the bottom. So it's a bit about teaching people outside. It's quite hard, isn't it? And I'm going to run through a couple of these things just to talk about the pros and cons. So we can obviously tell people stuff, but I suspect you've worked out now that just telling people stuff isn't really teaching people stuff. I'm sure Paul talked about this in his teaching learning styles session, and I haven't been to that. I'm going to that next week, so I'm looking forward to seeing what he's saying. But the fundamental principle is people have to process information at some stage. You can't just tell them it and they may expect to know it. It's easy if you're teaching rock climbing, isn't it? You show somebody how to put a nut in, you give them some nuts to play with, they get to put the nuts in, they've processed the information and applied the information. How to do that with things like the environment or leadership is more of a challenge in some ways, isn't it? So we'll have a look at some card sorts. We'll have a look at some laminated cards. We'll have a look at, I probably won't come back to, well, yeah, I will mention books again, and we'll pop on through these things. I should say, as I'm going through, I'm perfectly happy to stop at any point and empty the chat box. So if you want to be sticking anything in the chat box, any questions, then I'll come. We'll take a break sometime and have a look at those. So this is a little card sort I made. I picked 5 birds that I thought were good birds to know, because they're pretty common on the hill. You'll see them in most places: wren, raven, wheatear and meadow pipit in particular. I know you don't see cuckoos a lot, but everybody can recognize a cuckoo from the sound, can't they? So if you can recognize these birds and know what they're called, that's one thing. We then need to know a little bit about them, don't we? So here's just some things that I just scribbled down and if I'm inside, people can have a little play and try and match them up with the right bird. You can even talk about where the Latin name comes from. I've got some Welsh names in here as well, which is quite useful. And it just starts to help people build up a little bit of information. It's part of that processing thing. If they are indoors, they can recognize the birds and they can start to match up. The very act of moving these cards around helps people to remember something about that bird. Sitting as you are now, watching somebody else do it, it's really hard to remember it, isn't it? You actually have to move those cards around. So card sorts have a lot of value inside. Try doing this on a hill. I've never tried it outside. It's not going to work, is it? All right. How do you do this on a windy mountaintop, or even in a coombe, or might be able to do it in a bothy, I don't know. But you know, whilst it's a really good way of teaching, it might not work on the hill. And I know loads of you have played with these. If anybody's got any ways of making them work, then let me know. I've seen them made into sort of bingo cards, so people can tick things off as they go. Sounds like a great idea. I haven't seen it work terribly well. The ones on the left are from the Wildlife Trust. They're on the internet. They're free access. You can download them and you can print them out. The ones on the right got a little bit more information from Plant Life. And again, you can download and print those out, get them laminated. You can take them out with you. But of course, that one on the right, you can see that wildflowers in March. That doesn't necessarily mean wildflowers on the hill, or even wildflowers in the lowland area, or wildflowers you're going to see if you go cragging. So, you know, they're limited use in that sense. The IC guide is a nice little guide, a really nice little introduction that the Environmental Charter Group here in Snowdonia put together. That's worth a look. That's waterproof. They've got a coastal one as well. But again, it's just information. And the one that I know some of you love, but those people who tend to like the Field Studies Council cards either haven't used them or are botanists and know how to use them. But I know people who are not botanists, who are walkers and mountain leaders, and they see these and they think, whoa, that's the answer. That's brilliant. If you can read it, it is. But the problem with them is you shouldn't be looking at the side I've got on the photograph. You need to look at the other side. And on the other side is all the boring writing stuff, the keys, the botanical keys. So the Field Studies guides are written typically, not all of them, typically written for botanists, by botanists, not for mountain leaders, which is where we come back to Nature Snowdonia, Nature Lake District, Nature Brecon Beacons. Those are written by us, for us, and that's where they're different. What I would say with laminated cards is try and make your own. I had a little spell a couple of years ago where I was struggling with me alder and me elm and me beech and me white beam, and they all looked a bit the same. So I just made a laminated card with a few common trees on that, similar looking leaves. I've never used it because the very act of making it, I learned what I needed to learn. So yes, laminated cards are good, but they work much better if you make it yourself. And that's that processing the information business again, isn't it? That's you finding the picture, naming the picture, engaging with some information to go with that picture. So just taking them out and giving them to people, nice for show and tell, but don't expect them to learn from them. And because the other problem I've got is it's not quite single-use plastic, but it is plastic and it is going to be out there forever. So do we need to do this? And what I do now on my Nature Snowdonia workshops is I give people a PDF file. So they've got it on the phones. We can all use our phones now. We've got your phone in a waterproof bag, and they can flick through the PDF file for the support stories to what we're covering in the field. So trying to move away from laminated cards and using PDFs on phones instead might be something to think about. These are some other cards I made. This is another way of doing it. This is an old book. Got a book in a bookshop, a couple of quid for a bird book, pretty old. So I cut it up and laminated the sheets. Doesn't Well, it doesn't really work. If I explain with the tree one, I give these out sometimes. These tend to work better than the bird ones, but you have to know who you've given each card to. So you have to know that Sam has got the U card, and if you come across a U tree, you say, "Oh, Sam, you know something about U trees." And Sam's got the card in his hand, and he can read it out. Or it might be an elder tree. Probably more likely to be an elder tree in the uplands, and you say, "Anne, you know about elders, don't you?" And Anne will read out the card for elder for us. That's great for Sam, and it's great for Anne. But nobody else learns anything, because only Sam and Anne have engaged with the information, and hopefully they'll remember a bit of it. They won't remember it all. You'll remember 2 or 3 things that they've read out, but they won't remember the whole lot, okay? The rest of the group will probably remember none of it. Land use. What I'll usually do in a practical sense is at some point in the day, I'll just ask people what land uses they've observed today. And we can usually get some sort of recreation, farming, conservation, military, low flying, outdoor education. You might get somebody on a challenge event or something. So you'll get a few uses wherever you are. So having a few cards in your pocket is quite handy for this one. So what have I picked here? It's a fairly random selection here. I've got some motorbike damage in the top there, which we probably are fairly agreed is a bad thing here, but clearly the people who are doing it don't think it's a bad thing. So there is another point of view there. We've probably got the law on our side, whereas they haven't. I don't know anybody who's in favour of chucking litter over walls, and that drives us all mad, or going camping and leaving the tent, like you can see in the bottom, or those dratted disposable barbecues leaving their marks everywhere. So that's all pretty straightforward. Top left, you've got farming. You've got a bale of fencing left behind, which is really disappointing, isn't it? They're not carrying this stuff up there anymore. They're taking it up in 4-wheel drives and quad bikes and things. So not to take the excess fencing down is pretty bad. But I don't know, somehow we need to be friends with farmers, and they need to be friends with us as well, to be fair, because we are the groups with an active interest in the uplands, and somehow I think we need to get hill walkers, climbers and farmers much more in tune with each other, because we are the group of people who are making a living off this land. If you take the bottom right picture there, it's quite clear looking at the picture, the grazed and ungrazed. If you've got a group, you can ask them, hey, why does fence work for heather? Why does the fence stop heather spreading over here? And you can get a little conversation going about grazing and land use choices and land use patterns. It's not to say all sheep farming is a bad thing, because there are good things about sheep farming, aren't there? There's family, there's tradition, there's culture. Who doesn't love seeing a sheepdog running around the fells, rounding the sheep up? There's lots of nice things about sheep farming, not least eating lamb. But these are choices we have about how we manage this landscape, and we need to raise these issues with our groups, because our groups need to be going away and talking about it. They've got to vote at the end of the day. Currently, we're in a system whereby we're constantly cutting funding to the outdoors, cutting funding to national parks, funding to NRW and Natural England. So we need to get people on board a little bit to redress that balance and shift some of that money we're spending on roads and railways to looking after the countryside. Top right is an interesting one. Some of you'll know this spot in the Llanberis Pass, and one of these small-scale hydro schemes was put in. And you can see the scar from the small-scale hydro scheme, and the infinity pool up there as well, which is always quite amusing, isn't it? But there was a path up here, and what has happened, quite naturally, is people have started walking up the scar rather than the path. So the path looks as though it's the path that's causing the scar rather than the hydro scheme. So that, I don't know if that was, I don't think that was done on purpose, but the net result is it's not the hydro that's scarring the land, it's a footpath that's following the hydro scar. That's an interesting one to talk about. And then we've got the grouse. You've got perennial moors, bang on for hill and moorland. Not a massive issue in Snowdonia and the Lakes, but a big, big thing around the Cairngorms and North Yorkshire. And grouse shooters, driven grouse shooting is getting a bit of a tough press at the moment. But it's an interesting story, and it's one that I really think you should enlighten yourself about and get some good information on it. Mark Avery's Inglorious is a good place to start. I also get the weekly newsletters from the Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust, which is the pro-shooting lobby, because you've got to have both sides of these arguments. Though my mind's pretty made up, I'm afraid, but you know, you've got to try, haven't you? So what can you do with these cards? Well, I do take a few of these cards out on the hill now. And what I do, I love working in threes. I think 3 is a really good number for people to have a little conversation. 2s is just a bit cosy. 3s is good. So I'll give each 3 cards, and then each person in that 3 has to look at the card, interpret the card, see what it says about on the card, and then they have a little conversation about the 3 things they've got, the pros and cons, conflicts, what's going on in that story. Each 3 then reports back to the other 6, you know, the whole group, and gives them what's on their cards and talks about the pros and cons and things. Now, that's a lovely way of them summarizing their knowledge. Those 3 people will have worked quite hard with your prompting and your help to understand the things on the 3 cards you've given them. They will prepare a little speech for the rest of the group. So those 3 people will learn a lot about 3 things. The other 6 will just listen to it and not hear anything because they're a bit gripped about doing their presentation on the 3 things they've learned. So the whole 9 people won't learn about all 9 things that you've got, but each 3 will learn about 3 things. Do you see what I mean? So it's just a matter of understanding that just because you've told people stuff doesn't mean they've learned it. And somehow, somewhere, if you want them to know it, there needs to be some processing. So the upshot of all this is it's hard to do card sorts. You know, it can be a bit slow using a book. It can be a hit, bit and miss using your apps. The one resource you've got that's completely weatherproof and totally adaptable to the situation is you. So this session's as much about you learning stuff so that you can deliver stuff to people as much as it is about how to teach other people. And I'm going to give you an example of how to tell people stuff so they can remember it. I'm actually going to read from Nature Snowdonia here, and I've got to apologise to the Welsh speakers among you. I'll do my best, but it doesn't come easy to me. So this is a story of Llyn Idwal and how it got its name. In the 12th century, Owain ap Gruffydd, Prince of Gwynedd, had a young son called Idwal. Idwal was not a fighting man, but an excellent scholar. So when Owain had to leave the area to go to battle, he left Idwal in the care of his cousin, Nevydd. Unfortunately, Nevydd's son, Dynot, was not the brightest, and the arrival of Idwal showed him up. Nevydd was jealous. He was jealous that Owain should have such a bright and likeable boy as Idwal, with such sparkling humour and intellect, constantly overshadowing his own son, Dynot. One morning, Nevydd suggested that Dynot take Idwal for a walk around the lake, and that he should push Idwal in when he got the opportunity. They both knew Idwal could not swim, and as the 2 boys set off, the sun shone brightly, and Idwal, uplifted by his environs, sung merrily. As they reached a point where the lake dropped deeply from the shore, Dynot gave Idwal a mighty push. Idwal tumbled into the water and shouted for help as he struggled to stay above the surface. His efforts were in vain, and however, as Dunaut laughed down upon him. Owain was distraught at the death of his son, and suspected Nevydd and Dunaut of foul play. He banished them from the kingdom and named the lake Llynedwell in memory of his lost son. And according to the legend, the lake is now haunted by bad omens, so that no bird of the land will ever fly across Llynedwell. I'm sure you all know that story. I'm sure if you can't remember it word for word, I'm sure you can remember the gist of the story. And that's the point of what I'm saying here is, if you want to tell people stuff, you tell them stories. So you need to look for the stories in the landscape. So we can combine these things. We can get down our hands and knees like this chummer up the top here and look for things. We can get our phones out and take pictures of things. If we've got reception, we can use iNet or whatever it is now, PlantNet, sorry, iPlant or PlantNet to try and find out what these things are. But look for plants with stories. So on the left here, we've got thrift. Thrift has a little story, because thrift, you'll see it at Gelgarth, won't you? You'll see it on the sea cliffs. It's a maritime plant, and it has adaptations for growing in a maritime environment. It's cushion forming, so it forms its own little climate, its own little microclimate in the cushion of leaves at its base. That adaptation also works in the hills. So thrift can be seen in Cumidwell, in Cumglass as well, because those maritime adaptations work in the mountains too. Down the bottom there, I can't see it just at the moment. I think, is it some club moss we've got? So club moss has got a great story. Club moss, it's the one that, well, hang on, I'll come back to club moss because I've got another slide with another story. That's a picture of some toilet roll. Why have I got a picture of some toilet roll? It's to do with geology. Now, the geology of the Lake District, Scottish Highlands, Snowdonia, is complicated. It's often said that the geology of Snowdonia is probably about the second most complex in the world. There's the lower rhyolite tuff formation, which as a name in itself is pretty meaningless to most of us. But within the lower rhyolite tuff formation, there's all sorts of things going on. It's not just, sorry, I'm messing about with the photographs on my screen. The lower rhyolite tuff formation isn't just a lava or an ashfall or something like that. It's a whole series of things that are within it. So trying to understand the lower rhyolite tuff formation is difficult. Trying to understand geological time is difficult. So one of the reasons our geology is complex is because it's old. It's been around a long time. And when I say old, what do you mean by old? I'm quite old, aren't I? But I'm nowhere near as old as geological time. So how do I describe geological time to my group? Well, I take a toilet roll. I often take it in words rather than actions. And what I do with the toilet roll, proverbially speaking, is I roll it down the path, or ideally down a tarmac road. So if you imagine this toilet roll, keep hold of the end sheet so you don't lose it, roll it off down the hill, and you'll get quite a long piece of tissue paper stretched out there. And everybody can imagine, not exactly how long it'll be, but they can imagine a long piece of paper there. That toilet roll represents geological time. The perforations on the end of the sheet that you've got in your hand represent human history. So we're looking at a comparison between human history in the perforations and geological time on the toilet paper. And the Ordovician period, when the rocks in Snowdonia and the Lake District were formed, is probably about a quarter of a way down the toilet roll. There's a way bit more to go beyond they were done. So it's just a way of illustrating geological time and explaining that it's big. So it's hard to understand. Ice Age is another one. It does me head in the Ice Age. I hear so much rubbish about Ice Age that you wouldn't believe it. So you need to turn it into a story. there's always the story about the ice coming and going, it getting warmer, getting colder. There's periods of interglacial where the climate was warmer than it is now, and then it got colder again. But I tend to use, well, ideally some sheets of paper, but it's whatever you've got, to be honest. It works with hats and gloves. You find a little hollow, and like the left picture, you just drop your hat in there and you say, that is ice on one of these cold winters. Sorry, it's snow. But when the summer comes, it melts, so you take the hat away. But as you move into an ice age, the hat stays there. There's one comes into summer where it doesn't melt. Then the next summer it melts. Then the next one it doesn't melt, and the next one it doesn't melt, and the next one doesn't melt, and then the next one it's been so cold it's built up. So you drop some gloves on, and then you can drop some other things, and so you end up with this little pile of snow that hasn't thawed out during the summer, and it just goes, does that rotational slip that starts a corrie formation. So instead of just saying there's a corrie, steep bit at the back and extra on the side, you can tell that little story with a hat and a couple of gloves and just build up that picture in a little hollow where the whole thing stays there and stays there and stays there and just and forms that that rounded shape of a corrie. So try and experiment with these things. Try and look for stories. Plant evolution. I don't know if you've ever thought about plant evolution, but it's all around us. These are all things that you're going to walk past in the hills. You're going to walk past God, I forgot what it's called now. Dripwort, liverworts, isn't it? Liverworts, single cell plants is probably too grand a name for them down the bottom there. They were some of the first plants, so they've been around for millions of years. They evolved towards mosses. Mosses sort of reproduced in a slightly different way, and they released spores, but they needed moisture to release the spores. So club moss, the top middle picture, evolved from moss because it could release its spores in dry weather, so it could expand its range. And it was club mosses that were the dominant plant species in Carboniferous times 350 million years ago. So when you talk about the coal measures, and coal being made from fossilized trees, it's a load of rubbish. It was made from fossilized remains of the ancestors of club mosses. So club mosses were an adaptation to allow the plants to breed without moisture. To do that, they have this sort of explosive capsules of spores, and people thought, wow, that's cool. And they started using these explosive spores to make little explosions themselves, lycopodium powder. And so if you see the Victorian flash photography, it's made with lycopodium powder. You can buy lycopodium powder on the internet. You can just Google it now and find it. Ferns, gymnosperms, the fir trees are non-flowering seed plants, and then the top right, you've got a bog asphodel there, you've got the evolution of seed plants. But as seed plants have evolved, mosses are restricted to those wet, dark places, and club mosses have adapted to an Arctic alpine environment because they couldn't compete with the seed plants in the more fertile areas, so they've moved up the hill to the Arctic alpine environment. I can't see the chat box here actually. I don't know if I should be looking at it. We're okay, are we?
Yeah.
I don't know why I can't see it. Never mind.
Si's just referenced that there's a stash of the Upland booklets available for MTC providers. Same goes for MTE actually, if you contact the office.
Great. So the pebble story. What's the pebble story? I love the pebble story. Those pebbles are on a beach. They came from that mountain on the left. That mountain does not want to be a mountain. That's sad, isn't it? We love mountains, but they really don't like being mountains. They want to be plains. So the angular material we can see in the picture there gets weathered out by rain, by frost, by whatever's going on, biological weathering, feet, and is loosened off and kicked off down these valleys, down these combes. Gravity will help it move down that slope. Rainfall, runoff, snow, all sorts of mediums will help that angular rock roll down that slope and end up in a watercourse. When it's in a watercourse, it gets moved by the water. Sometimes it's traction along the bottom, sometimes it's in suspension, sometimes it's saltation. These different processes go on And if you're a geographer, you can make a little list of them like this, and you could say, I want you to write a poem. I want you to tell me the story. I want you to sing me a song, and I want you to use these words. It's the journey of a pebble, because all those stones on the right-hand picture were once up in the mountains. How did they get where they are, and why do they look like they do? They've lost all the lovely angles. All those edges have gone, and they're just all smooth and all looking the same now. They've lost the character. Personify it. Turn it into a story. I'm sure you all know this one. You're all well up to speed with the insectivorous plants, but we like the insectivorous plants because they're a story, aren't they? They grow in nitrogen deficient bogs, and they need nitrogen to grow. So they get their nitrogen, instead of from the soil, they get it from insects. So sundews and butterworts have sticky leaves, which will capture the insects, and they can suck. Probably not the right word, but does it matter too much? They can take the nitrogen from the insects and turn that into growth. I'll tell you a little thing that I always quite find interesting is how tall the flowers are on a butterwort or a sundew. They're always quite tall relative to the size of the plant. And if you think about it, there's a good reason for that, isn't it? Because I still need insects to pollinate, but they don't want to eat the insects that are doing the pollination. So if you look at sundew or butterwort when it's in compared to the size of the plant, and it's so that the insects that are doing the pollination don't get caught up on the sticky leaves and get eaten. So it keeps the species propagating. How many archaeology stories are there? The top left there, we've got a house platform in the Llanberis Pass. Who lived there and when did they live there? This could be 2,000 years old, this house platform. There could have been a family living there. This is in Cumglass. They could be farming in Cumglass. Can you imagine that? A couple of cows, some goats, some geese, growing a few crops, cutting some hay, living in Cumglass 2,000 years ago. Maybe the slate quarries are easier to relate to. Maybe some of you've got family who worked in mines and quarries around the country. Maybe you can talk about their lives. Maybe you can talk about a quarry man working 6 days a week, going home Saturday night, going to chapel Sunday morning, spending Sunday afternoon with his family, and then walking back to live in the barracks for the rest of the week. And that's just half the story, isn't it? What was his family doing during the week? What's his wife doing? How's she keeping the family? How's she looking at her family? What's she eating? What's she wearing? What's she doing while he's living a life of Riley in the barracks and down the slate mine every day? You can put an angle on any of these stories. One of the fascinating things about the quarries is all the stuff you can see in that picture. There's no profit in that. We see beautiful embankments, buildings, inclines, all sorts of archways and things. No profit in that. The only profit came from the actual goods produced, in this case, the slate that was produced. So why did they put such effort into that? Why do we see such magnificent structures? Is it merely because those are the best, most efficient ways of doing it? Or did they actually have some pride in what they were building? So take a closer look at those industrial ruins. Wherever you are, this is not just unique to Wales, the Lake District, Scotland, Yorkshire Dales. You know, everywhere you go, there's mining history to delve into. And I love that top right picture. That's one of the gun emplacements at the top of the Nant Franken. And if you work through that story as well with people and talk about the Home Guard, everybody knows the Home Guard, you know, Corporal Jones and Captain Mannering and Private Pike would come up from Bethesda and sit in this, take turns sitting in here, arguing about who has a machine gun this week and who's got the World War II rifle. And they're looking out for Germans that have landed in Ireland and come across and are wandering up the Nant Franken or driving tanks up the Nant. Hang on a minute though. To drive your tank up Nant Franken, to invade up the Nant Franken, they've actually come through Bethesda. So that little Home Guard unit that are sat up there in this gun emplacement, do they know what's going on in Bethesda? What's happened to their houses? What's happened to their families? What's going on? What's the story? You need to identify with that story. Less humorous and really serious is the one down the bottom, and there's so many of these sad stories in all our hills. A little book about them here in North Wales is No Landing Place, a guide to the aircraft crashes. Now, personally, I'm quite keen on the geology. I'm quite keen on the flowers. I'm quite keen on the birds. I'm not that interested in the airplane crashes, but some of the people I take out this really excites them, and they get on this little pilgrimage, if you like, of buying these books of aircraft crashes. There's some really good online sites, and it gives them a good navigation target. But they're really, really sad places to go to. I went there with some engineers from Rolls-Royce, risk assessment and the upland environment work, and they had to have a minute's silence when we got to the site. They just all stood around to remember the pilots who'd lost their lives in these tragic crashes. And when you do a little bit of research, so often you'll find they're youngsters, 18, 19, early 20s. You'll find they were Canadians or Australians, and people that were just training, learning how to fly these planes. Equipment wasn't good. You got blown off course, and they just flew into the mountains. So some really sad stories there, but stories. And what you're looking for to inspire the people you're taking out to the hills are stories. So as I say, you need to develop, I think you need to develop stories. I think cards are brilliant. I obviously think books are brilliant. Nature Snowdonia is designed to be used in all weather conditions. If it gets wet and falls to bits, you just buy another copy. Jim's cards are lovely. They're pretty substantial out there. I don't think you can. Can you hear the volume on that?
No.
No, I don't think you can. It's when you import a video into a PowerPoint and show it through this medium, you can't hear the conversation, but it doesn't matter. This is a film that I made about Jim's cards, some ideas of how to use them, and I put it onto the YouTube channel. So I've got a YouTube channel that's got that on. I'm going to stop it because I can hear it, and it's really annoying while I'm trying to talk and trying to listen to it, because it's ever so good, it's really distracting. That's on my YouTube channel. You can get to that through my Facebook page, and there's some other things on there that might be of use to you. I'm having a go at my own e-learning modules. The style I've adopted is slightly different to mountain trainings, and I'm doing them as MP4 video files so that you can pause it, rewind it, watch it with a friend. They're just slightly different way of doing it, that's all. Jim Langley's doing some really nice webinars, getting some experts in. I'm starting a series of Facebook Live conversations with experts. That's something to watch out for. If you go to my page, Notes from the Hill, you'll find those. And I'm sure there's loads of other stuff. Workshops being a key one, because this is just me telling you stuff. And if I'm just telling you stuff, you're not going to remember it. I've tried to tell you some stories, but mostly I've just told you stuff. So come on a workshop. You guys need to come on the Nice to Know, Need to Know workshop, because that's a workshop where we take people who know nothing, people who know a bit, and we try and work out, play with that line, because it's not a fixed line, of what is nice to know and what you need to know. Which I'm sorry, Simon, but I think I've actually spoke enough.
Hi, Mike. That is not a problem at all. What time are we on? Let me just have a look. 10 to 3. So do you think you've finished up now, Mike? Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any questions? Has anybody got any questions? That's what we should go into, isn't it?
That's what I was just going to suggest. So I guess it's probably best if that goes onto the chat so that we're not talking over the top of each other. And I would imagine that's probably got everybody.
If I stop this share, that's the thing to do, isn't it? Yeah,
then you'll be able to pick up the chat.
I can see the chat there. So folks, get typing and bang some questions in for me. IC, yes, we talked about the IC there. I showed you a picture of that. They're available from Simon. That's brilliant. Thanks, Mike.
Just to say, I've spoken to Guy in the last 10 minutes, and MTE have also got a stash of those IC Snowdonia Upland guides available for providers. So if you get in contact with Jill at the office, she will arrange those to be posted out.
Okay, cool. So card chart, thank you very much, Mike Rosser. Snowdonia is second most complex geological area. I always say that because then people say, what's the most complex? So thank you to Stuart for asking that question. And I'm told by geologists that it's actually the Lizard Peninsula. And what's bizarre about the Lizard Peninsula is it's a bit of the southern continent. So if you go back in your plate tectonics to we had a northern continent, Pangaea, and a southern continent, Gondwanaland, and the Lizard Peninsula is a bit of Gondwanaland that's stuck onto Pangaea. So it confused geologists for years. They were like, what? This just doesn't make sense. It doesn't add up. So the Lizard Peninsula is generally considered the most complex, but Snowdonia is certainly the second. So don't beat yourself up about it. One of my forthcoming e-learning modules will be explaining why it's complex rather than trying to explain it. I think that, for me, that's the way for us as mountain leaders to take it. Lake District book's interesting. You know, you'll see a bit of banter about a Lake District book. It's something I've thought about for quite a while, but being based in Snowdonia, it didn't feel right doing it. And the glib answer, of course, is you take the nature Snowdonia and then you just reduce it because there's so much more grazing in the Lake District. It's all bracken, isn't it? You know, what else is in the lakes apart from grass and bracken? Fortunately, a chap called Graham Mooney has picked up the cudgel and he's going to run with it. And he irritatingly keeps putting wonderful pictures of fascinating, diverse areas, diverse botanical areas that are hidden away in the Lake District. So Graham used to work for the RSPB. Graham is, you know, he properly knows his birds, properly knows his environment. So I'm definitely looking forward to that one. And I should say, no, I won't say that. There's also the nature of Brecon Beacons as well. Don't forget about that. And we're hoping that you'll buy the set. It's not one of those things that you need one or the other. In the meantime, Nature Snowdonia does work in the Lake District. It does work in Scotland and Ireland. And most of what you see on a typical hill walk is in there. So grab yourself a Nature Snowdonia. The second edition is much better than the first edition. Take it out in the rain, get it wet through, and then you can buy another one. Great tips and tricks, thank you. Don't forget to go through the flowers and birds. Thank you, Pete Goldsmith. I had forgotten that. And Graham Mooney's put on there, hoping to have it published by the end of April. So it'll be available midsummer. And I know from experience not to say whether that's 2021 or 2022, but I think Graham's pretty good at writing books. So fingers crossed there. Hey, I'm glad you mentioned Leave No Trace as well, because Leave No Trace is something that I actually had in my script, but you know what you like when you get going with these things. I think it's interesting, Leave No Trace, because I think when it first came over, I think we were a bit snooty about it, a bit snobbish, you know, we're like, oh, we don't need Leave No Trace. It's bleeding obvious, isn't it, Leave No Trace? But sadly, from what we've seen this year, particularly this year, it's obviously not obvious to people to leave no trace. And there's a group of people we're taking out now that a lot of it will be educated, but there's also a group of people who just don't care as well. So I think Leave No Trace is something that we perhaps should revisit as mountain training providers in England, Wales and Scotland. I know it's doing quite well in Ireland. But you know, I think it might be a nettle we have to grasp actually. Apps, yeah. The one I use most of all is PlantNet because it definitely identifies your flowers for you. That works really well. BirdTrack and Lurk are good for reporting stuff. iGeology is good if you're a geologist. The problem with iGeology is you'll touch on the interactive map and it'll tell you where you are and what the rocks are, but then you've got to be able to understand what it's telling you, because what it tells you in geological language. So that's not always that good. There's a nice little one called British Trees, but what I often do in a workshop is work through the key in one like British Trees, and you don't always get the right answer. So using them critically is really important. So apps are something that are developing constantly. I definitely don't think we're at end game on apps at the moment. And you've kind of got a choice between taking a book as an app, which is good, or an app that's interactive like PlantNet that will do some identification for you. But you need to be able to check that identification. You need to be able to check that it's right. Yeah, iNaturalist, that's the other one. Yeah, thanks, Andy. That's really good as well. And some people are using Google Eye as well. So do experiment with those. That's good. Any other questions? Shall I go through those flowers? So you'll remember these from the beginning. Number 1 on the flowers is obviously butterwort. Butterwort. Number 2 is harebell. Number 3, might have got you this one, tor. That's a tor from Dartmoor. Tormentil. Number 4, there are some stars there. Starry Night, Starry Saxy Frage. I love this. Roseroot. You ever see some roseroot? Just have a little smell of the roots. It smells like roses. That's why it gets its name. Foxglove, there's an easy one for you. And did you get Stag's Horn Club Moss? Stag's Horn Club Moss. Globe flower. Heath bedstraw. And the last one there, this caught a few people out in the last workshop I did, but there's some snow there. That's Don Willans and Lily Savage. Snow Don Lily. I don't know if the birds are easier or harder, but you've got a picture of a ray and a van, a ray van. You've got a meadow, and some pips, and some IT, a meadow pipit. Then we've got a pie, wagtail, pied wagtail. Did you get that? Wheat here. Number 5 are wrens. Number 6 is, there was a time where cider was made with apples. It's very confusing buying cider these days, isn't it? But if you got cider that was made with pears, it was called perry. So this is perry and a grin, peregrine. I think this one might also show your age as well. That's Buzz Aldrin, the astronaut, and that's somebody doing something hard. So this is buzzard. What's the next one? Red. Can't remember. Grouse. Oh, that's right, isn't it? Red grouse. Red grouse. Alistair Cook, the cricketer, and Doctor Who. So that must be Cook Who. Cuckoo. And then we've got oh, what's this one? I can't remember what this one is. This must be P. Somebody tell me what it is. Gold P. Oh, lover. Golden lover. That's your quiz. I've finished, Simon. Club moss. I did, Bren. You missed me. The thing about club moss is it's that important step in the evolution of plants where the moss left the wet places could reproduce in dry places by releasing its spores in an explosive manner, which we clocked onto and use as lycopodium powder, or used for photography in Victorian times. And then it's retreated to the Arctic alpine zone. So it's quite a cool little plant to know a bit about. It's club moss. But hey, that's all in Nature Snowdonia. You've only got to read it over. I'll finish, Simon. Any other questions?
Yeah, looks like it's all gone quiet in the chat.
You're welcome.
Oh, no.
Next pub quiz.
Yeah. Very good, Kit. Mike, thank you for that. That was very interesting, and hopefully some people have got some really good ideas to take away to encourage people to get to know our mountains a bit more. Thanks to everyone for coming along today, making the effort. It's great to see so many people on this workshop. Mike did lots of workshops coming up of all different types, so I would encourage you to check out his Facebook page and Notes from the Hill to see what's going on. It's always entertaining, as you've just discovered, delivered in his style. So again, thanks, Mike, for your efforts today. It's really appreciated, and thanks to everybody for coming along. It was great to see you. Cheerio.
Bye, folks.